There's a debate in the horror community that I think is very important to address and discuss when it comes to the primal level of fear that a story can invoke within the reader. And that's, does a story need to be extremely complex? Does it need to be fully fleshed out for you to get the message across and scare the daylights out of somebody? Or is there certain examples that can focus on simplicity, focus on strictly getting to the point, and due to that simplicity, due to the very basic, fundamental, terrifying things about that story, can you get the point across to potential viewers and readers? And I think that this is probably one of the best examples from that. And it comes from the foundational and most important short story collection to me that is responsible for the very reason why I'm into horror. Before Goosebumps, before any other piece of horror media, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark was the series that got me into reading horror. It's one of the most nostalgic, most important pieces to me. And urban legends, retellings of these stories lost in time, and Stephen Gamel's timeless, fantastic, and best horror artwork in all of history plays into why this short story collection is so important. But if you had to ask me what short story in the very first Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark book is the most effective to me and is the one that stuck with me as an adult till this day and scares me even as an adult, it is none other than the Wendigo. Now, of course, this short story is only a couple pages long, so the review won't be that long, but I did think it was important to talk about this one. While I don't think necessarily it's the best short story in all of the Scary Stories trilogy, there are two stories that I do put above the Wendigo. One involving, I think it was in the third book, and my favorite short story being in the second book. This short story, The Wendigo, in the very first book, is genuinely terrifying. It is so creepy. It is so eerie. It affects me on a primal level of fear. And it's so interesting to me because it incorporates Native American culture and an entity, a malevolent spirit from Native American culture that I think genuinely is one of the most terrifying creatures out there in horror media, horror mythology, and everything else. Again, if you can't tell, we're talking about the Wendigo, both the spirit and in the short story. So what is the Wendigo about? Well, the Wendigo in Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark is actually a retelling, a shortened version of, I think, Algernon Blackwood's novel made in 1910 called The Wendigo. That was kind of the first horror piece of media, the first horror book that kind of put the idea of the Native American mythology of the Wendigo into the mainstream eye. And Alvin Schwartz basically collected that story, condensed it, and made it into a promotional story for kids, short and easy to consume. And of course, Stephen Gamel's artwork enhances the story by quite a bit if you've read it. So what is it about? I'm going to keep it short because it's very easy to spoil. But the Wendigo in Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark is about this wealthy hunter who's basically hunting up in northern Canada. He's hunting during the winter. It's the cold winter season, and the forest is covered in snow, very eerie, very dark. And of course, Stephen Gamel's artwork plays into the story. You have this completely plain just image of snow, footprints, these dark, eerie footprints going across the snowbank. You have these trees in the distance painted to kind of look like figures overlooking you, and these shadowy paintings. And it just makes it super eerie, super dark, and super creepy, just to commend Stephen Gamel. But again, this wealthy hunter is basically in northern Canada. It's during the winter time, and he's trying to go hunt in this specific territory. However, he's unable to do so because everybody thinks it's too dangerous. They don't want to risk it. And eventually he ends up finding a Native American guide who's willing to take him out there named Defago, or Defago, but I think it's Defago. So he manages to get to Defago to come out with them. They hunt for like 3 days. They're not very successful. And during this time, it's very creepy, very eerie for them. And the wealthy hunter one night, as they were basically trying to rest to get ready for the next day, he hears this howling wind, this blasting wind outside. Crazy. He hears the trees swaying, and it's very intense, very eerie. However, as he unzips his tent and looks outside, he notices that actually the trees are not moving at all. Yet he can hear this wind clearly blasting and clearly howling outside. So he's wondering, what is causing this? Because I can clearly hear it. I can clearly make out that there's this wind blowing, and yet nothing around me is moving. So what is the source of this sound? And then he starts hallucinating, and he starts swearing that this wind is eerily moaning out, Defago, Defago. And he starts getting really paranoid, and all of a sudden he calls out to Defago. Defago unzips and looks out, and as soon as Defago hears the sound of the wind, he immediately starts trying to get up and run into the middle of the darkness. The wealthy hunter tackles him, tries to keep him down, and as soon as he's about to try to talk to Defago about why he's so paranoid, Defago manages to break out of the hold and sprints into the darkness in the wooded forest, and he starts screaming his head off the entire time, yelling, "My feet are burning! My feet are on fire!" And he keeps screaming and howling in pain and howling in terror into the middle of the night. The hunter is very taken aback from this. He goes and starts tracking the footprints. And as he starts tracking the footprints, he realizes something is off. He starts realizing that the gaps and distance between the footprints is becoming inhumanly long, and that this is no possible way able to be created by any human, because the wingspan, the leg span of these footprints is getting abnormally huge, in gaps. And he starts coming to the theory that maybe something was assisting him to move across this landscape. And that starts piquing curiosity, because he notices that once it gets by the frozen lake that they've been hunting by, the footprints all of a sudden disappear. He thinks that maybe Defago could have fallen into the frozen lake for some reason. It still doesn't explain why he was so paranoid and took off. And then he realizes that none of the ice is broken. There's no indication that he fell through the ice. So the question comes down to, where is Defago? What happened to Defago? And what caused him to be so terrified? And then as this basically fruitless hunt gets nowhere, eventually, I think months later or some time passes, and the wealthy hunter decides to return to that territory to hunt once again. And after speaking to some locals, he finds out about a story involving the Wendigo. The Wendigo is a malevolent spirit, this entity that the Native American culture reveres and talks about. And there's a story that the locals say that is an urban legend, according to the Native Americans, that this entity, the Wendigo, travels through the wind. And when it manages to psychologically compromise and target a victim, it then is able to carry off the target utilizing the wind that it's moving through. And it carries off the victim so fast that their feet basically start burning up, as well as the rest of their body. And eventually, at some point, the Wendigo will drop its victim from the sky and let them plummet to their death. And after hearing this, the wealthy hunter starts trying to piece things together. He realizes maybe the fear, the psychological fear behind Defago was tied to this. Maybe something involving the legend regards to what Defago was yelling about. And upon his re-journey into the territory, he experiences something that was very dark, very disturbing, and really truly traumatized him. And that ending to the story is horrifying, yet super effective, and it works so well. To me, this short story is great. It's simple, it's creepy, it's eerie. The setting of the winter forest at night is super dark and disturbing. If you've ever stood outside by a forest area, my I live by a forest. I know about forest times during the winter and cold season when the trees are bare and they look ominous and look like they're reaching towards you. The idea of being in the woods at night during the winter, the dead of winter, all by yourself is creepy enough. But then when you get to the idea of the wind howling out people's names and blasting at full speed, yet none of the trees are moving, it is supernaturally affecting nature. That is extra terrifying. The idea of being isolated, being targeted, is the whole kind of basis as to why the Wendigo urban legend exists in Native American culture. And that's especially highlighted with the short story. And just the idea of the Wendigo, a lot of times the Wendigo is highlighted on being, cannibalistic, super hungry, being this entity with horns and a deer head and super scary, creepy, lanky, kind of looking like a spirit that eats people. But then you got this short story, which takes the Wendigo into a completely different direction. It focuses on the idea of the Wendigo being this malevolent creature who uses nature to his advantage. The idea of a victim being carried off so fast that their feet start burning, that their body lights on fire, and the thing dropping it to their death before claiming its next victim is horrifying. It gives this deity-like presence to the Wendigo, this level of ominous power to it that really is super effective. And again, the very ending to the short story, which I will not spoil, really just sort of reinforces how terrifying the whole experience is, and again plays into the whole paranoia and super dark aspects. So the Wendigo short story by Alvin Schwartz, retold from the original novel, and Stephen Gamel's artwork is fantastic. I really enjoyed it, and I do have to say that it is super important in terms of horror to me. I think the short story is effective, even though it's simple, even though it's retelling a previous novel, which I will be reading that novel. This is a great introduction to kids. This is the idea of urban legends at its peak. And man, do I recommend all of you guys check it out. It is one of the eeriest short stories. It is so to the point, and yet that's why it's haunted me all over these years. And I love it. I love it to death. All right. Not enough death to be carried off by the wind, but nonetheless, I love it to death to at least talk about it. That's all I have for today. Hope you guys enjoyed this little video about Alvin Schwartz's story. If you liked it, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. That's all I have. I have other content as well on this channel. If you're new here, check it out down below. And RIP to Akira Toriyama, the creator of Dragon Ball. He passed away and he left behind a great legacy, so I just want to pay homage to him. And also, that also plays into me paying homage to Stephen Gamel. Stephen Gamel, another great artist. So I want to pay respects to both of them. Yeah, that's all I have for today. Hope you guys enjoyed, and deuces. And just like the Wendigo, I will use the power of the wind and blow off now. But before I go, Horror Tavern, subscribe and like. He's almost at 200 subscribers. Do it.